Merry Christmas everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Mr. Francy and welcome back to Mr. Francy Reads. Today it is time to get on to another one of my favourites / non-favourites of the year. And in fact, not only today, but also in the next video that you see, we're going to be focusing on some non-favourites for the year. Yes, if you are here for the darker side of the favourites and non-favourites of the year, you have come to the right place. But to be sure that you do receive the notifications for all of the videos that I am doing, not only now, but for the remainder of the time I'm on booktube, then do hit that subscribe button and also the notification bell, ding, to ensure that you get all of those notifications. Today's non-favourite video is going to be about all of the books that I DNF'd in 2021. For those of you who don't know, DNF is a great reader term that stands for did not finish. In other words, you picked up a book that you thought was going to be amazing, and then for whatever reason it wasn't, or you just didn't agree with it, or you just didn't want to read it anymore, so you put it back down and you planned not to go back to it ever again. So, what books did I DNF in the year of 2021? Surprisingly for me, I DNF'd a lot less than I thought I did. To put this into perspective, on average I read about 12 books a month. This year in 2021, I DNF'd 13 books, so just over a month's worth of books DNF'd. That's not like me. Normally it's a lot more. But that's okay because I have a lot to discuss with you about the books that I did DNF. So let's get right on into it. All the books that I DNF'd in 2021 in 3, 2, 1, go. So the first book that I DNF'd in 2021 was this book, which is an ARC book, so I'll turn it around. It is called Foul is Fair and it is by Hannah Capin. I DNF'd this book after the very first chapter. Why? Here's why. This book opens up with our protagonist who very early on, I think a couple of pages in, is holding a knife. Our author, Hannah Capin, decides to describe this knife, and this is how she describes it. She says, "It is so sharp that to look at it, you will bleed." Now, I have no issue with violence in books, but my problem is jumping into the violence too soon, before I've had a chance to even get invested in my characters. This is a reason why I DNF'd another one of my books that will be coming up soon. It was just way too much, way too soon. The second book that I DNF'd in the year of 2021 was this book, Princess Ben by Catherine Gilbert Murdoch. Okay, so I was actually really excited to go into this book. I DNF'd this book very early on. In fact, I DNF'd it in January of this year alongside Foul is Fair by Hannah Capin, and I wasn't very versed in classics back in those days. Now, I am well versed in classics, but then I wasn't. And my problem with this book was the writing style. Before I talk about that writing style, I'll just tell you why I was so intrigued. This seems to be a book, by its cover, by its title, that has a royal, regal setting. I love royal, regal books. But after a couple of chapters, I had to put this book down. Why? The writing style. It was written in what I referred to back then as ye old English. Now, my problem with this was, one, as I said, I was not well versed in classics, so the idea of reading something that had a writing style that was so old was really tough for me. But two, I found myself working extremely hard with this book, and reading to me is a passion. I don't want to have to work for my reading. Are you kidding me? It was too much. I felt like I was translating every sentence or every second sentence. No! Before I introduce the third book that I DNF'd, if you are a fan of Sarah J. Maas, you might want to tune out for this one. The third book that I DNF'd was this book, which is House of Earth and Blood, book 1 in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. So obviously this book has received a ton of attention on booktube, and for me, I wanted to be a part of that conversation. So I purchased this book to read it and get actively involved in that discussion. You guys, I gave this book a go. I got 200 pages in before I DNF'd. I'm so happy I said this at the time in my seasonal DNFs video, because today I would have forgotten where I DNF'd it, but I made it 200 pages in. That is dedication for me, considering the reason why I DNF'd this book after 200 pages was that, again, if you're a Sarah J. Maas fan, just cover your ears for a moment. I was so completely bored with this book, you guys. I'm so sorry. I know there are a lot of people who love her as an author, and there are a lot of people who love this book, but it just was not working for me. The next book that I DNF'd was Wicked by Gregory Maguire. Okay, the reason I purchased this book was because I had not seen the show prior to purchasing it, and I really wanted to see the show, so I thought the book would be a great compromise. So I purchased the book to see what the story would be like. You guys, Mr. Francy has never struggled as much as he has struggled with this book. When I did my seasonal DNF video that included this book, I was actually saying that I thought I got quite far into the book. And then I realized I only got about 86 pages in. Those 86 pages took me a week to get through. Now, if you're new to my channel, to give you some sort of an idea of the type of reader I am, at some point this year, I read a very, very, very hefty book called The Count of Monte Cristo. This book is 1,276 pages long, this edition, and the book itself is actually taller. The pages are bigger, so more words per page in this one than in this one. I read this 1,276 page book in a week. It took me a week to read 86 pages of this one. It just wasn't reeling me in. It just wasn't doing it for me, you guys. The writing style just wasn't working. I thought that this book was written in like the 50s or 60s. Apparently, it was written in the late 90s. I don't get that. There are so many great books that were written in the 90s. This does not read like a 90s written book. The next book that I DNF'd was of that same vein as Hannah Cabot's Foul is Fair. I'm going to tell you why I DNF'd it first, and then I will show you the book. So, once again, the reason why I DNF'd this book, just like with Foul is Fair, is because we open up with our main character doing something so completely action-packed, or so completely non-introductory, if that makes sense. It's like we're thrown into a world. I don't know who these characters are, or in this case, who this character was. And this character, I'll give you a clue, is running for his life, and I don't know why. And by the end of chapter 1, I still didn't know why. See, I have no problem if you're going to drop me into a world and say a character is running for their lives, but by the end of page 2, you better have started telling me why this character is running for their lives, and not have them keep running, and by the end of chapter 1, I still don't know what the heck is going on and why we're even running in the first place. I'm so sorry, Joe Abercrombie fans, but I'm referring to the Blade itself. It just didn't work for me. The next book that I DNF'd was this book, The Year the Maps Changed by Danielle Binks. This is a book that I had not seen floating around booktube. And so when I end up receiving this book, I actually received it as an ARC copy. You can see here it says uncorrected proof copy. I was actually really excited that I'd received an ARC of something that I hadn't heard being discussed. I was so happy that I was going to be talking about this book on my channel. And then I got about 4 chapters in and I DNF'd the heck out of this book, and let me tell you why. Nothing was happening. Seriously, 4 chapters in and nothing was happening. Seriously, how is nothing happening after 4 chapters? The next book that I DNF'd, I did actually regret. Well, no, I didn't. I didn't regret it, but I was really unhappy that I ended up having to DNF this book for 2 reasons. One of them being, my sister actually bought this book for me for Christmas, and so I felt horrible that a book that she had bought for me, I DNF'd. And the other reason was, this book is actually an LGBTIQ+ books, and if you've been with me long enough, you know how much they mean for me, but this book, I gave it a go. I really did, a red hot go. And it just didn't work. And that book is called My Only Sunshine by Rowan McAllister. So as you can see on the cover, it appears to be a cowboy romance. I was really excited to get into this one. I mean, cowboy romance? Let's try this. Let's see where we go. No. I started off listening to this book as an audiobook because that day I was cleaning and I wanted to get into the book, so I thought put on the audiobook, put in the earphones and clean away while listening, and the audiobook wasn't working for me. The narrator sounded extremely dry to me as far as their tone of voice and their inflection. There was no inflection. The narrator to me sounded like they couldn't be more bored if they tried. And have you ever listened to an audiobook where you can just sense the narrator is just reading the words on the page? They're not enjoying themselves. That's what I was getting. Literally, it was something along the lines of, it was a cold and dreary night and Marco needed to go to the lake, so he put on his bathing gear and then he went down to the lake. And here I am, trying not to fall asleep listening to this book. So I decided to DNF the audiobook and pick up the physical version, read the physical version. Then I realized it actually is not, or was not, the narrator's fault at all. To me, Rowan McAllister has written a completely dry book. And when I say dry, I mean after the first chapter, which took me a long time to get through, I had been filled with nothing but exposition. And I don't like that. It took forever for me to even find a quote. Characters weren't even talking for a long time. How does this happen? I'm sorry, maybe there are books out there that are like that, but not most of the books that I've come across. For this next one, I'm gonna have to ask some of you to just forgive me and maybe turn away and block your ears when I talk about this one. I'm not gonna talk in spoilery detail, but some of you have told me you're gonna read this book soon, and I didn't want to go here, but it's my DNF video, so I kind of have to now talk about it. I'll try and be brief. The next book that I DNF'd was The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. Now, those of you who are planning to read this book, skip ahead. So basically all I'm going to say about this is that it is dual perspective. We follow two different perspectives in this book. I liked one of them. I didn't like the other. My problem was that the one that I liked showed up a lot less than the one that I didn't like. And the one that I didn't like annoyed me more and more and more as time went on. A lot of people have talked about how amazing this magic system is. Is it? Maybe I didn't get far enough to find out what the magic system was, but I think I at least got a quarter of the way through. I got a decent chunk of the way through. It just wasn't working for me. The next book that I DNF'd was this book, The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. Please take a moment to enjoy this cover. I'm sure I have, I'm sure I will, but it will be on hold at the beginning of next year, despite the fact that I moved heck and high water to get this edition. The premise is completely misleading. I'm going to tell you a bit about the premise because, hey, it's a premise, so it shouldn't be a spoiler. The premise of this book is that we are following a woman who is incredibly intelligent in the world of science. So she decides one day that she's going to create a replica of herself that does all the things she doesn't want to do to see if her husband is going to have an affair. Sounds interesting, right? That's why I purchased the book. Now let's get on to page 1 of the book, where we slowly come to find out that this has all already taken place. She has already created the replica went and did the replica's work that the original wanted the replica to do, the husband did cheat, the husband moved out, the husband's now living with the replica, and now the book begins on page 1. So all of these things that I thought we were going to get a lead up to that, we were going to see the wife do this. Oh, no, 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 no. The premise of the book is telling you what happens before the book begins. So I don't want this. I want the prequel. I want to see it actually happen and not get to chapter 1 and have the author tell me, well, now that this has already happened, let's see what happens next. I don't care. The next book that I DNF'd was this book. Again, it is an ARC copy of Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I know, a lot of you right now are yelling, or what I like to call whisper screaming, because you don't want to scream around everyone else, so you whisper screaming going, "There's no Francy!" and you're whispering it. But either way, I know you're upset with me. I know, but it didn't work for me, and let me tell you why. For the benefit of those who have not read this book, Piranesi is, in my mind, it's not a book. I mean, obviously it's a book, it's bounded like a book, but it's actually, to me, a compendium of journal entries, which doesn't work for me, and let me explain why. Because there might be a way the journal entries work for me, but this one definitely did not. The reason it doesn't work for me is because I want backstory with my characters so I can get invested in them. If you have journal entries alongside standard narration, then that works. You know, open up with a couple of letters, or open up with a letter and then some standard narration and then another letter and then more standard narration. That works. But because this is just journal entry after journal entry after journal entry after journal entry, I was being thrown into a world that I didn't know, and I wasn't getting to know it. By the time I DNF'd this book, I still didn't know what the heck was going on. So I know there are a lot of people out there who love this book, but it's okay, because I'm an individual and I love to stand on my own 2 feet. Oh, I'm sorry, Piranesi. The next book that I DNF'd was this book, The Aeronaut's Windlass by Mr. Jim Butcher. The more I looked at it, the more I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to like this book, and I really got in my head going, this is not the book for me. Why did I buy this? Looking at this book, this scares me. I'm really going to hate this book, aren't I? And yep, I did. So in October, I decided that alongside my Halloween-themed reads, that I was also, for the spirit of Halloween, going to put books onto my TBR that I was scared of actually picking up. And this was one of them. I made it through the first, I think, chapter or 2, and then decided to DNF, and I'll tell you why. It definitely was a personal reason. This book seemed like it was going in the direction of a nautical adventure, and I had just come off of, not too long before this book, reading a nautical adventure book that I actually didn't mind, except for the nautical adventure part of it. So when this book seemed to be headed in that direction, I very gladly DNF'd. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the book, it was just personal preference. Mr. Francy would like to make a very quick statement before presenting the next book that I DNF'd. With the next book that I DNF'd, it is through no fault of the author's own. The author has written, for what I got up to, an amazing book. I DNF'd it because I made some mistakes, and those mistakes led me to a situation where I DNF'd it. The book, however, is a good book. So, now that I've said that, the next book that I DNF'd was The Foxhole Court by Nora Sakavic. Again, this is a great book. Just so you know, my camera doesn't like when I hold up that book because the lighting goes down, as you can see. So I'm just going to put the book down. You've seen it already, and I'm just going to talk about it like this. So, The Foxhole Court by Nora Sakavic is a great book. I was really enjoying my time with it. There was an unfortunate situation with me, which was that while I was reading that book, I was quite heavily distracted. I had a lot of different things going on in my life at that point in time, and so I was listening to it on audiobook, and unfortunately I was dipping in and out, and that's the type of book that you cannot dip in and out of. I end up missing 3 very key important nuggets in the book, and once you miss just one thing, you feel like you're out of the loop, because Nora Sakavic doesn't bring those things up again, which is fine. She shouldn't have to. She's already written it once. But I didn't miss 1 or 2. I missed 3 important nuggets, and by the time I missed the 3rd one, I felt so very far out of the book. The reason I say it's not Nora Sakavic's fault was because up until that point, I was really loving what I was reading. I don't know if it's a DNF or a shelf, but for 2021, it's definitely a DNF. And the final book that I DNF'd for 2021 is one that I've talked about quite a bit recently, and that was this little gem of a book called The Little French Bridal Shop. The premise of this book states that we are following a woman who has just for a short time, moved to her mother's small town to take care of her because her mother is sick. She passes by a little French bridal shop where she sees a wedding dress in the window that she wants to try on. Unbeknownst to her, residents of the town see her trying on the dress and assume she's getting married, so they plan a wedding behind her back. It sounded like all types of fun. I even set this up as a buddy read because I was so convinced this was going to be an amazing book. Yeah, That's not what happened. First of all, she tried on more than one dress. And secondly, she started and perpetuated a lie that she was getting married. There was no unbeknownst to her. She knew exactly what she was doing. And that is not what the premise said, nor was it what I signed up for. And that is why I DNF'd the Little French Bridal Shop. And now for everyone's favourite game that we like to call These are the books that I DNF'd in 2021. Which books did you DNF, if any, in 2021? Let me know in the comments section below. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it. For further updates, or if you'd like this video, please give it a like down below and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell, ding, to get all those notifications. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Thank you so much for watching, and of course, happy reading!